Lesson 8. The Cost of Capital. Part 2. The Lie Detector for Companies. Please read and pay attention to the disclaimer on this slide. In the first part of this lesson, we explored how the cost of capital represents one side of a very important coin in the investing world. The other side of that coin is the return on capital, a measure that indicates how effectively a company uses its financial resources to generate profits. This metric is pivotal for assessing a company's operational excellence and is one of the best ways to measure the quality of a company. Given its significance, we will dedicate this lesson to understanding the return on capital and its impact on business performance. As we saw with the case of clueless capital, when companies earn low returns on their investments, they're hurting shareholders. On the other hand, companies that earn returns above their cost of capital are usually viewed as superior businesses. This view attracts investor interest, often leading to increased demand for the company's shares, which can drive up their stock prices. Look at the image. You don't want to invest in companies that are burning through shareholders' money. Now, let's go over what return on capital actually is. Return on capital analysis provides insights into a company's financial health, uncovering aspects often overlooked by traditional financial ratio analysis discussed in Lesson 5, Part 1. Consider this example for clarity. Imagine a company that manufactures flying saucers. This company produces and sells one saucer annually for $1 billion. The production cost per saucer is $800 million, leading to a profit of $200 million each year. This profit is determined by subtracting the production costs from the revenue. This results in a profit margin of 20%, which is notably higher than the average profit margin of companies listed in the S&P 500 index. As we discussed previously, such high profit margins typically indicate a robust business. The challenge facing the flying saucer company lies in its substantial initial investment. The factory required $10 billion to build. From this investment, the company earns a profit of $200 million annually, translating to a mere 2% return on the factory investment. This return is calculated by dividing the annual profit of $200 million by the initial $10 billion investment. Such a low return on investment is starkly inferior to safer alternatives, like US Treasury bonds, which offer double the return with virtually no risk. A return on capital analysis indicates that despite high profit margins, the flying saucer manufacturing business presents a less attractive option for capital investment. Investors in the stock market look at how much they earn each year as a percentage. For example, they might make a 15% profit in 1 year. Companies do something similar. Instead of putting their money into stocks, they invest in things like equipment and hiring people to grow their business. They also measure their success in percentage terms. One common way companies check if their investments are paying off is by using return on equity, or ROE. The return on equity helps show how well a company is making money with its investments. To calculate the return on equity, you divide the company's yearly net income by its average shareholders' equity for the year. Let me show you how the return on equity analysis can reveal the truth about the strength of a company's business with a discussion about the railroad industry. The railroad industry might not seem like a rapidly evolving sector, especially since it's been around for over 200 years. Many assume that its infrastructure, particularly the tracks, are primarily composed of steel. However, following the Staggers Rail Act of 1980, which deregulated the industry, the tracks have increasingly been paved with money. This landmark legislation transformed the railroad industry in the United States into a more efficient and financially robust sector. It led to a wave of consolidation, resulting in fewer but larger and more stable companies dominating the landscape. The consolidation that followed the Staggers Act significantly enhanced the profitability of the railroad industry. In the 1960s, the United States boasted over 100 Class I freight railroads. By the 1970s, this number had dwindled to several dozen, and following the Staggers Act, the industry's consolidation pace quickened. Today, there are only 7 Class 1 freight railroads remaining in the US. This trend mirrors the lesson from our lemonade stand comparison in Lesson 5, Part 1 about income statements, where less competition equates to greater profits. Similarly, the reduction in the number of railroad companies has been particularly beneficial for Union Pacific, the nation's second-largest railroad company, illustrating a transformative impact on the industry that we will explore further. Presented on the slide is a 3-year historical analysis of Union Pacific's return on equity. The average shareholders' equity is listed in the exhibit. It's calculated based on the shareholders' equity at the beginning of a given year and the shareholders' equity at the end of that year. Take the sum of those two numbers and divide by 2. In 2020, Union Pacific's return on equity was 30.5%. In 2021, it increased to 41.9% and then increased again to 53.2% in 2022. That's a very high return on equity for a company with a cost of equity somewhere between 10 and 12%. How strong is Union Pacific's return on equity? Consider this. Microsoft, a top global software company, achieved an average return on equity of 43% over the past 5 years. Believe it or not, Union Pacific generated a return on equity of 53.2% in 2022, surpassing one of the leading tech giants. We can see from the exhibit on this slide that Union Pacific has been generating a return on equity that's been well above its cost of equity capital. This is a sign of a great company. At this point, your head might be spinning from all this numerical analysis. Again, why are we talking about this? The return on capital is in fact one of the most important tools for estimating the long-term growth potential of a company. I can illustrate this point effectively with a compelling graph. Remember, we just showed you that Union Pacific generates a very high return on capital, well above its cost of capital. The graph on this slide compares the relative performance of Union Pacific's stock price versus the S&P 500 index going back to 1985. Over that period, Union Pacific's stock rose by 5,985%, substantially outperforming the 2,755% return for the S&P 500 index. So, yes, a company's return on capital matters a lot in the stock market. But here's what's really important. It's not enough to generate a high return on equity. A company must be able to sustain that high return over many years to produce long-term business growth. That's what Union Pacific was able to achieve over many years. For a company to maintain a high return on equity, it must find opportunities to reinvest its profits at high returns. Such opportunities are crucial for sustainable growth. Pay attention to the lesson here because understanding the impact of attractive reinvestment opportunities is vital as an investor. These opportunities fuel long-term growth that is highly valued in the stock market. To illustrate this, consider 2 hypothetical pizza parlors. One parlor is nestled in a small village with only 200 residents, while the other is located in the heart of New York City. Assume each parlor was built with an investment of $1 million and each earns an annual profit of $1 million. The pizza parlor in the small village already serves all the residents, who all live close to the parlor. Using profits to build a new parlor would only cannibalize the existing parlor's business. Since there are no opportunities to invest in a new parlor, the owners just withdraw the $1 million in profits each year, and their business doesn't grow. New York is a big city that can support many more pizza parlors than in just one location. The owners could reinvest the annual $1 million in profit back into the business, opening one new parlor a year. After 5 years, they would own 5 places generating $5 million in annual profit, instead of just one earning $1 million. There's a lesson in the pizza parlor comparison. There are many companies that generate a high return on capital but have nowhere to invest their profits at equally high returns. Companies need both high returns and attractive opportunities to reinvest their capital to sustain superior long-term business growth. Understanding the cost of capital is essential not only in the stock market but also for entrepreneurs seeking to fund new ventures. For startups, it can be the deciding factor between success and failure. For business executives, the cost of capital is a crucial metric that determines which projects are financially feasible and which are not. To illustrate the impact of the cost of capital, let's consider an unconventional scenario: a treasure hunt. Imagine Captain Silvertooth, who, after being shipwrecked on a remote island, stumbles upon a cave. Inside this cave, beneath a layer of dust, he finds a wooden tube containing a rolled map, hinting at hidden treasures. Silvertooth was rescued from the island. When he made it back to the mainland, he took the map to the best treasure map authenticator in the world, Galleon Maprite Easton. To his complete shock, Maprite told him that he was holding on to the map of legends, Blackbeard's treasure map. Have you heard of the infamous English pirate, Edward Teach, or better known as Captain Blackbeard? Blackbeard was a notorious pirate who operated along the eastern coast of the US and the West Indies in the early 18th century, 300 years ago. On November 22, 1718, his reign of terror ended when he was killed in a battle against the British naval force led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard. But the legend of Blackbeard did not end on that day of battle. According to the legend, before his death, Blackbeard buried his treasure and created a map showing its location. Based on historical records, Blackbeard's treasure is estimated to be worth $25 million. Just to be clear, we are talking about the numbers in today's dollars, just to make the lesson more relatable. As we said, Silvertooth shipwrecked his last boat. He has the map, but he has no boat, no crew, and no money to fund the expedition. To search for the treasure, Silvertooth needs to rent a ship and find a willing crew. However, given the extreme risks involved with the voyage, the cost to get the ship and crew is $15 million. Silvertooth knows the CEO of Learn Wall Street Capital, Cash Profitmore. Profitmore is famous for making risky bets in search of outsized returns. He's obsessed with the legend of Blackbeard's treasure. His firm funded 3 prior expeditions looking for the treasure, but none of the attempts succeeded because he didn't have the map. Profitmore is very interested in financing the treasure hunt. He will invest any amount up to the full cost of the mission, which is $15 million. However, he wants to double his money if the expedition is a success. Also, he wants to be paid first before Silvertooth. Should Silvertooth take the money from Profitmore? The answer is definitely no, unless he wants to end up broke. Remember, Mr. Profitmore wants to double his money. If Silvertooth borrows the $15 million from Profitmore, Profitmore gets all the money from the found treasure until he receives a total of $30 million. Since the treasure is worth only $25 million, Profitmore will get the entire $25 million. Even if he finds the treasure, Silvertooth will get nothing. Silvertooth tries to borrow the money for the treasure hunt from a bank. He visits a number of banks in the port town. Each time, he shows the bankers the map, and each time they ask about the active volcano on the island where the treasure is supposed to be. And each time, the bankers get up abruptly and leave the room. The bankers think the expedition is too risky to lend Silvertooth the money. Silvertooth gets depressed about his failure to get a bank loan. Galleon Maprite, the map expert, tells Silvertooth not to worry. His twin brother is president of the Gamblemore Bank. Galleon and Silvertooth go visit Galleon's brother, Pennywise Maprite. Thanks to Galleon, the Gamblemore Bank will lend Silvertooth the money for the treasure hunt. However, there are conditions to the loan. The bank will lend Silvertooth $10 million. He will have to get the remaining $5 million from someone else. The borrowing cost on the bank loan is a high 20% because of the risks of the voyage. The bank gets paid back with interest first, before anyone else. With $10 million from the bank, Silvertooth only needs $5 million from Profitmore. Profitmore still wants to double his money. For $5 million, he wants $10 million back if the treasure is found. Should Silvertooth take the $10 million from the bank and the $5 million from Profitmore? Oh yes, Silvertooth should take the money. Let's do the math. If Silvertooth finds Blackbeard's long-lost treasure, then that's a $25 million score. The bank gets paid first. They lent Silvertooth $10 million. With the 20% interest on the loan, the borrowing cost is $2 million. So he has to pay them back $12 million. That leaves $13 million left over to be distributed to Profitmore and Silvertooth. Profitmore invested $5 million. He was promised a 100% return, so he gets $10 million. The remaining $3 million goes to Silvertooth. That's not bad for a month's worth of work. The treasure hunt exercise teaches us important business lessons. Just like Silvertooth, who needed funding for his expedition and had to ensure the treasure's value exceeded the cost of finding it, businesses must carefully consider both their expenses and potential profits. The story shows that in both treasure hunting and running a business, the cost of capital can be the difference between success and failure. Understanding this is essential whether you're searching for treasure, starting your own business in a garage in Silicon Valley, or managing an existing business. Congratulations, you've completed Lesson 8, Part 2.